Hello, I'm Vivian Campbell and welcome to Hot Licks Video. Before we proceed today, we'll start by tuning up. Here is a high E. And B. G. D. A. And E. Okay, so now that we're in tune, let's continue with the video. The first thing I'd like to get into would be some warm-up skills, and I'd like to touch on technique. This isn't going to be a video about technique, really, aside from maybe some right-hand uses for muting the strings or for double picking. And we'll start off with a scale. We'll take a scale of, say, B minor, starting on the E6 string on the A. Now, I believe it's important to pick in both directions, both up and down. A lot of guitar players will pick just down strokes, and a lot of guitar players will pick up strokes, and if you have to choose between the two, if you're one of those guitar players, I would always go for the upstroke because it's always easier. You apply less tension when you up pick as opposed to down picking. If you down pick, you tend to lean in too much to the string, and you'll get cramps in your forearm and whatever else, and you'll get a lot of extra string noise. It's really unnecessary. So try just doing a simple scale like this, double picking. Try to start off going on the upstroke and then coming down, and alternately. Now, I would suggest that as a guitar player, you practice scales each and every day. It is the only way to loosen your muscles and to keep yourself in such a state that you'll be able to perform in your best. When I was with Dio, I used to practice probably 3, 4, 5 hours a day on the road prior to doing the shows, and I just used to play scales like this, and it's incredibly boring. It's the most tedious thing to do in the world, but it is a very worthwhile thing in the long run. Like I say, you should concentrate on your double picking, up, down, down, alternating as much as possible. Or if you have a tendency to go one way or the other, lean towards upstrokes, like guitar players like Jakey Lee and George Lynch would tend to do that kind of thing, and it tends to make you more light with your right hand and you don't dig in so much. We'll try doing a scale like that, maybe a little faster just with upstrokes. Show you what I mean. You can pick occasionally down, but most of the time you keep coming up. You can alternate it as much as possible. Ideally, it'd be nice to keep it a constant flowing motion, one up, one down, one up, one down. You don't have to pick every note in the scale. What I was doing earlier was picking every note like this. But you could go for an approach where you pick maybe one in every 3 notes or one in every 4. Try that a few times and try and feel the difference between pulling up with the pick as opposed to leaning into it, and I think you'll see that it'll be a lot easier. Also, I would like to recommend, though it's not something that I do as a guitar player, and this is a bad habit, that I happen to lean in with my thumb onto the back of the neck, if you can see that, and that's not always a good thing. It is an easier way to play guitar, but I think if you watch any of the really great guitar players like Jimi Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen, their thumb is always very relaxed over the top of the fretboard, and they would play their scale kind of like this. As opposed to digging into the back of the neck like this. Now, to start off with, it's easier to play fast if you just happen to push your thumb into the back of the neck like that, but in the long run it doesn't help you. You'll find that it's very hard to get from one situation into another, from one lick to get back into playing a chord progression, or to change a lick, or to move up the neck. It's very, very restrictive when you're applying pressure with your left hand, and it tends to make it like you're sticking to the fretboard. So you want to keep it as relaxed as possible with both hands. Try loosening up your pick hand. Try, if you feel you're too heavy when you're picking, when you're doing scales like this, try maybe extending your thumb and your finger like that, so that you're not actually leaning the pressure of your arm or your hand on it, so it's just a way out on its own, like this. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, if you're not so heavy with that hand and you're not so heavy with your left hand, then maybe you'll be able to flow more and you'll be able to play scales better. Okay, so still on the subject of technique, and specifically the right hand, we'll discuss muting. That is leaning the palm of your hand near the bridge to dampen the strings, and therefore adding a lot of bottom end and a lot of depth and a lot of clarity to whatever it is you happen to be playing. And they work particularly well when you're muting pull-offs, which was something else I wanted to discuss in this video. A pull-off is hitting 1, 2, or 3, or however amount of notes on an open string, and your last note of that particular scale being the open string. For argument's sake, this is in the key of E. On the B string, this is a pull-off using 3 notes. Now, the difference when I mute it, you can probably hear it punches a lot more, and it's got a lot more drive and more clarity. I'll play it without muting it this time, and you'll hear the difference. Still sounds good, but it's a lot more expansive without muting. If you don't shorten the notes and make them more abrupt, they tend to get very wishy and washy and wispy, and you know, it's the kind kind of thing that'll get lost when you're playing with the band. So if you really want your sound to cut through, I recommend that you mute a lot when you play solos. It also helps add a lot of feel and a lot of dimension to whatever it is you happen to be playing, be it a chord progression or a scale or a solo or whatever. The ability to stop a string from ringing and going crazy helps create an individual's tone a lot. So we're here still on the right hand. Now there's another thing that I'm sure a lot of you have noticed about my style, and that is split harmonics. Very effective. But not when you play them like that. Now a split harmonic is applied if you apply a lot of pressure to the string and you turn the pick to an angle. And get rid of this hair, I'll show you. Instead of picking up and down like this, if you want to hit a harmonic, you turn your pick to the side, you find the spot. Now there's usually two spots in between these two pickups right here where you'll find a split harmonic. There are two of them on every string. That's one, and that's the other. The difference is like a fourth. It's something that's very common to a lot of blues guitar players, a lot of players who play heavy with the right hand, who have a heavy technique, like Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top. I picked up the habit from Rory Gallagher, who was an Irish blues guitar player, who I first saw years and years ago, and he played a lot of scales like this, where he would actually play whole runs of split harmonics because he leaned in with the pick so heavy. It's something you got to learn to control if you want to use it right. You have a tendency to play far, far too heavy when you do that a lot, and that's something that I was doing myself and something that I'm trying to get away from as a guitar player, and that goes back to the subject of up picking and down picking. You've got to learn to be able to do both, but this is always a useful thing. If you really want your sound to pierce and to cut through, when I was on tour with Dio, who must have been one of the loudest rock and roll bands in the world, a lot of people used to say that whenever we played a big arena where the sound bounces around the walls, the only time that they could ever hear anything I played was when I had a split harmonic, because it's such a high frequency that it just pierces and cuts through everything else. So for all you lead guitar players who are frustrated about not being heard because your singer's too loud, you know, split harmonics are the way to go. Very effective little things. So, back to the subject of pull-offs again. There's a lot of them you can do. They basically work around the open chords, like the chords of E and A. Specifically in E, you can play a lot of different. You just basically play around the scale, but instead of playing a scale, like I said before, your last note of each little passage of 3 or 4 notes is an open string, be it an E string, a B or a G or a D or an A or a bottom E, whichever. Now, you can actually use them all. Check this out. So we'll do it slow. It's on the E string, 5th fret, 3rd fret, and then open string. And again, bring your right hand technique in and mute the string so that it doesn't ring and go wild, and it'll be a lot more punchy. Now move your first finger down 1 fret and incorporate the 2nd fret. Now we're in the key of E, and you can do exactly the same thing on the B string. Now to the G string, it's a different configuration. It is 4th fret and 2nd fret and open string. It's the same thing on the D string. Now you want to try all 4 at once? you practice it, you can do that. Yet again, I emphasize it, although I'm not doing it, you should try and learn to do this kind of thing really slow and keep your thumb relaxed and don't apply pressure. It's much easier the way I'm doing it to just apply pressure to the back of the neck like so, because it gives you an automatic pivoting point for your fingers, and it's not so easy, you'll find, if you try and rest your thumb over the top of the fretboard, but in the long run you'll find it more beneficial because you'll have more dexterity and more freedom and the ability to move around the fretboard much more that way. So all of these things I'm showing you, I would suggest that you take one a day and really spend a lot of time doing each and every one, because they take a lot of time to get over. As you can see, I haven't even got them yet myself. So pull-offs, you can go right up the neck using the open string. I'll show you how. Like I said before, they work mostly in the keys of E and A, and particularly in E. And most rock and roll songs are in E. And if you're a songwriter and you want to play things like I just write songs in E, very simple solution. Okay, earlier at the start of the tip, you may have seen me playing pull-offs, but with a slight difference. Instead of fingering on here and doing hammer-ons like a lot of guitar players, that's something I haven't got into yet. I do it backwards, so to speak. I will do pull-offs, and what I'm actually doing is, instead of moving up the nut, which I can't do, I just use my finger to bar and slide up here, so that I'm actually creating a different progression with every move. And that's something to look at. That's like doing hammer-ons, but with a difference. Also, at the start of the tip, you may have seen me holding the neck like this when I was playing. That wasn't quite the same technique. When I used that live, a lot of people used to ask me after the show, was I actually barring strings here? Was I actually hitting notes? And I wish I was, but I wasn't. All I was really doing was muting the strings and stopping them from ringing. And that's an old Jimi Hendrix technique. If you ever saw Hendrix do that, he used to grab the neck and mute the strings and pull it and stuff, and use that to vibrate the strings instead of using his wangy bar. But it's a very effective technique. You could play any sort of little progression. All you're really doing is stopping the rest of the strings from resonating and vibrating and creating unwanted noise. And instead of picking the notes, you're actually just hammering on. If you've got a lot of strength in your left hand and your fingers like I do, then you don't really need to pick a lot. You can get around it. So that's something else that I think everyone should explore. It's a great way of cheating. I find it a lot easier to play fast and fluid this way when I don't have to concentrate on getting the picking technique together as well. So something else I would like to show you, when using that, you want something that flows a lot. You don't want to be stuttering up and down the neck and trying to find a little scale or a little passage to play. You've got to keep something that has some sort of continuity and some sort of flow to it. And the perfect thing for that, I think, are these little licks that I stole from Gary Moore or someone many years ago. It's actually just a progression of 4 notes, and all I'm doing is taking a basic scale, a minor scale like I showed you earlier, like say B minor, and taking any 4 notes that happen to be on 2 strings. For argument's sake, here we're in the key of B. Those 4 notes are in the minor scale of B minor. You actually play them in rapid succession, so it's a continual cycling thing. You don't pick every note, you pick twice for 4 notes, so you're picking 1 every 2 notes. I'll try and do it slow if you watch. Now, like I said, if you have strength in your fingers, you don't even have to pick that. You can mute the strings. It's a very easy thing to do, and it sounds very effective, and the bliss about it is that you can apply that as long as you know your scale and you know what notes which, you can actually do that all the way up and down the fretboard in whatever key you want, and you can go from one section of 4 notes to another and to another. I'll show you the kind of thing I mean. You would actually go all the way up and down the fretboard doing that if you know your scales well enough. And it's a very easy way to get yourself out of a rut if you happen to end up playing too fast and you don't know where to go next. Like I said, it's a very easy thing to do, and it sounds very, very effective. All right, earlier when I was talking about pull-offs and stuff, I said they're great if you know the scale. And if you don't know the scales, we'll go back over that. We'll just revise that. A minor scale in A minor starts, check it out, on a G. And around that scale, you can play a lot of those patterns I was showing you, like this. Now, there are a few notes that you won't find in the scale that you can still use a lot. These would be blues notes. There's one in particular, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. If you're playing an A, those are notes that aren't actually in the scale. A blues note to me is a note that hinges between being in a minor scale and a major scale. You actually go from minor and bend into major, and that's what makes it a blues note for me personally. Like, for argument's sake, the major third to A would be D flat. So when you're playing a blues in A minor, if you use that D flat, or better still, if you bend a note to that D flat, it gives it a real blues feel, like this. The other note was an F sharp. F sharp is not relative to the key of A minor. However, it is very relative to the key of A major. And if you throw that on a minor scale, if you use an F sharp on an A minor scale, it sounds very bluesy. Now these scales I was showing you, this A minor, if you're playing a song and the song is in a major key and your minor scales don't sound right with it, and you're probably wondering, well, what's a major scale? It's probably something completely different from a minor scale. And yes, it is true, it's a completely different scale, but when you're playing a guitar, like an instrument like the guitar is a very easy thing to play because it's the same pattern, the same physical pattern, just in a different position, and there are relative keys for minor and major. Like I said before, A minor, you play around the actual A position like I've just shown you. When a song is in A major, you move exactly the same position down 3 spaces to F sharp, which is the relative key. So as I can't play it down here because there isn't enough frets, I'll play it up here. But check it out, it's exactly the same scale as I showed you down here, it's just in F sharp, and it'll be relative to a major key. But then again, I doubt too many of you watching this video are going to be playing cowboy songs, so maybe you won't need to worry about that. But it is something useful to know. In a lot of blues songs, really great guitar players can go from a minor key or a minor scale to a major scale and back to the minor again. And this modulation is very, very tasty if it's used in proportion, as long as it's not overdone. A guitar player called Brian Robertson, used to be with Thin Lizzy, used to do that a lot. That was a trademark of his. And yet again, another favorite of mine, Gary Moore, does that quite a lot too. So it's a simple thing to bear in mind. There are relative keys to your minors, and though you won't need majors a lot, they are exactly the same scales in a different position, and that's something you should learn. Basically, the rule of thumb is if you want to find the relative major to a minor chord, for argument's sake, A, it's down exactly 3 frets. A flat, G, F sharp. That's the relative minor. So you can play the same scale in 2 different positions. It'll give you 2 completely different sounds. Another scale, and notes that you won't find in the regular minor or major scale, would be a diminished scale, typical to a lot of players like Ritchie Blackmore and Yngwie Malmsteen, who uses very dramatic notes. It would be a diminished scale. Staying in the key of A, I'll show you a diminished scale. It actually starts on an A flat, which is very unusual. One or two notes in there are very diminished, I'll have you know. But anyway, that is something that you should practice. It's a very, very hard scale to play physically. It doesn't follow suit as nicely as most scales do. Most scales that you play for rock and roll guitar, your fingers happen to fall onto the right place. They're well laid out. This particular scale goes diagonally across the fretboard like that, and it's pretty hard to get up, and it's even harder to get back down, I find. But you should try and build up some speed with it anyway. Try picking every note to begin with, and if you can get away with picking every note, doing up and down strokes, that'll be more beneficial to you. Another scale you might want to consider would be a chromatic scale, that is going up in half steps or semitones, or in layman's terms, a fret at a time. It's very good to build up strength in all your fingers and to evenly distribute the strength. A lot of guitar players have very, very weak pinkies. Well, that's not always a good thing. You've got 4 fingers, you may as well try and use them also. This is just a chromatic scale, just going up all the strings, and yet again, you can also use this to help practice your picking technique, up, down, all the way. You could do that from the open string all the way up to the 22nd fret, or however many frets you have, and do it real slow and real careful, and I think after a few days you'll find you'll be able to whiz at that. And yet again, I emphasize, keep your thumb relaxed when you're doing this. This will be a perfect all-round exercise. It exercises all your fingers. You can do it slow enough so that it'll exercise your picking technique. It's a very even stroking technique. It's 4 on every string, 4, 4, 4, 4 on all 6 strings, and then back down again. And you're moving up 1 fret at a time all the way. So it's a very all-round exercise, and it's something I used to do a lot. And judging by the way I played that, is something I should do a lot more. So now another thing, when you have strength in your fingers, you can get a lot more feel and a lot more technique into chord playing as well as solo playing. An example of this would be to be able to vibrate and to be able to really shake a chord. There's not a lot of rock and roll guitar players nowadays who do that because they have very sterile techniques and they tend to not even play full chords. A lot of guitar players who play bar chord positions will just play the first and fifth and the first again. They actually don't play a whole chord. Which is well and good, but it can get very repetitive. If you don't have any chord voicings or any different ways to orchestrate a song, it gets very, very redundant and repetitive, and that's a problem that a lot of rock and roll bands have, is they write songs that sound very similar because they always use the same chord techniques. So strengthen your fingers by using that chromatic scale exercise, and you'll be able to vibrate strings and play chords of 2 notes in different voicings and really get a lot of feel in them like this. Familiar song. So I could actually vibrate. I could play 2 strings at a time and really shake them and really vibrate them, and even again apply the technique of split harmonics, which sounds really cool on a chord and not just on single notes. Or another thing that was very common to my style of playing with Dio was to bend 2 strings a full tone at once. Instead of just bending 1 string, bend them both. It sounds a lot more gutsy and it's a lot more vicious and gives you a lot more attack and more bite. And if you want to be rock and roll, you got to be that way. So still on the subject of chords, like I said, a lot of guitar players learn how to play bar chords in just one position, and that is the actual bar where you use your first finger to bar all the strings. This is a bar chord of G major. Not so many guitar players nowadays use what is called the choking technique, whereby you use your thumb to play the root note on the bottom E string, like this. Again, it's a matter of preference. I have always played in the bar style, and I'm currently teaching myself to play in a choking style, which is synonymous with players like Jimi Hendrix and more country-influenced players who tend to play like that. But it gives you a lot more versatility, I believe, if you can actually play around a chord by not having to put yourself in that bar position. It's like I explained earlier, when you have your thumb on the back of the neck and you're applying pressure, even if it's not a lot of pressure to play a bar chord, the fact is you're still in an awkward position to do anything within the framework of the chord. You've got to come out of that thumb position and around over the neck like this. If you play in the choking style, you can keep your thumb there the whole time and you can still play around the chord, which is a useful thing. Again, it's a matter of preference, but from my own point of view, I think it's best to be able to play chords both ways. It also gives you a chance to be able to voice chords better. I found that getting away from hard rock and roll a lot, where you just play first and fifth in your chords, if you want to play a different chord, like this kind of chord, for example, whatever it is, more jazz-style chords or different chord voicings than you would normally play in a heavy metal or a rock and roll band. It's very hard to get into that habit of playing like that if you've been playing bar chords all your life, because you cannot successfully move from one jazz chord variation to another when you have your thumb pressed on the back of the neck. Like I said, it has to be a much more relaxed style, and therefore I emphasize again to try the choking style and to always try when you practice, be it chord scales or whatever, to try and keep your thumb relaxed and keep your thumb that it's not working and so that it's feeling no pressure. is actually employing harmonics to using the palm of my hand where I would be muting the string at the bridge to run it over the pickups and up the neck very, very slowly and catch the different harmonics while I'm doing a pull-off with my left hand. Works better on the A string. I'll demonstrate it there. Just a useful trick, but really all you got to do is be very, very light with your palm and just move it forward and catch all the harmonics. You don't need to come right the way up the neck, because the harmonics will finish right about here, right about where the neck joins the body on the guitar. If you practice this well and you're real light, you can do it on all the strings. It's much harder to do on the thinner strings. Sounds a bit funky, but I'm sure you'll find a use for it somewhere. Okay, I'd like to talk some more about right-hand techniques, specifically being funky, hopping around a lot more, being more chunky, I guess, with your right hand. A lot of guitar players are very sterile and very clinical, and they only use their right hand for picking. You know, they don't actually apply any soul to whatever it is they happen to be playing. For anyone who's familiar with the first Dio album, there's a song called Rainbow in the Dark where I used a very funky right-hand technique in the middle of the solo, and it's this kind of thing here. All it's really like is just keeping it springy and keeping it washy and choppy, and it's a very rhythmic kind of thing. I'm a very rhythmic guitar player, and if I wasn't a guitar player, I'd definitely be a drummer or a used car salesman, one or the other. So, but it's, like I say, it's a funky kind of thing. It's not to everyone's taste, but it is something that I would recommend that a lot of younger guitar players get into, because it gives you a much more rhythmic approach to your playing, and like I said, you're not so clinical, not so sterile. You can jump around a lot. You can do this kind of thing. You see, I'm not actually playing notes as much as just keeping it choppy and keeping it moving right along. It tends to fill it out a lot more for me. And for my new band, Trinity, which is a three-piece kind of thing, we've got a lot of rhythmic overtones like that. You know, it's just the one instrument. There is no keyboard or second guitar in the band, so I tend to fill out a lot by playing very rhythmic rhythms, if you would. Also, on the subject of the right hand again, finger tapping is something that, like I say, I'm not at all qualified in. For that, you want to check out people like Jeff Watson from Night Ranger, who use all 8 fingers. However, you can help along your chords a lot by tapping on the harmonics at the octave, like, say for argument's sake, a chord of open A. C. It's not the kind of thing you could play in the middle of a song. It would make a nice intro of sorts. It's a very subtle effect. You can make it more choppy by actually slapping the strings, a lot like a bass player would use slap and pull. Okay, for those of you who use your pinky and who have any sort of a spread at all, I have a couple of things I can show you. The This one, the first one, is something I used in a song on the Dio Sacred Heart album, on a song called King of Rock and Roll. It's what Ronnie Dio kindly refers to as spider hopping, and it's something I use a lot because, like I said before, I'm a rhythmic player. I tend to attack the strings a lot. Rather than start on the first note, which would be the high E, I spread into it like that, and I would pull the pick across the strings to give it much more dynamics to lead into the actual lick. So maybe that's something you could try as well. You got to have the spread between the first and fourth fingers. I'm spreading 5 frets here, and landing my second finger on the lower octave, which would be the E. You'll find you won't have to actually pick that E, that if you use your second finger to hammer on, that'll be strong enough. So all I'm picking is just once. I'm just picking the very first wave of notes. It's a very easy thing to do once you get it down, if you can start to use your pinky a little more. The other thing I'd like to show you would be a bit of a stretch that I've never seen any other guitar player do before, but like I say, I was never into doing hammer-ons a lot, and this would be the kind of thing I guess you would do with a hammer-on, or whatever it is, but instead I employ my pinky for it. That's something, again, that I used in a Dio song. I used that in the solo in The Last in Line, which was the second Dio album. You could do this again in any key, though obviously you've got to keep it high up the fretboard, because as the frets are wider down near the bottom, you couldn't really stretch that far. You could do it all 6 strings. It is something I used to do in my live solo with Dio a lot. It requires a lot of stretching, and it requires a lot of strength in the little finger. I used to do this a lot when my little finger was stronger. Again, though, it does encourage some bad habits with the thumb, because there's no way you're going to be able to play that and leave your thumb hanging on the top of the fretboard. You are inclined to apply a lot of pressure to the back of the neck with your thumb, and like I said before, that's not always a good thing. But bear in mind that these are just special one-off techniques that you may want to use at parties or bar mitzvahs or whatever. And so one other thing before I go, at the very start of the tape, I was demonstrating a pull-off technique and using my index finger on my right hand to bridge and move up. I'll just show you that again, because there was something I left out on it. So as you can see, when you use your pinky to do stuff like that, when you use it to back up your left hand playing scales up and down the neck, or pull-offs as those were, you have the opportunity to bend with both hands. And this is something that Randy Rhoads employed when he was with Ozzy Osbourne. He used to do trills and whatever. And pull from behind, rather than using the wang bar or whatever, or bending with his left hand. You can pull with, like I said, with your right hand. You can get real cool and play with both. random stuff. Like I said before, I don't know if you'll ever find a use for any of that stuff, but it's pretty flash, you know. Well, that's the end of the video, and in conclusion, I'd like to say that all the things that I've shown you today are things that you're not going to learn overnight, and things that I haven't learned overnight, and I still haven't learned properly yet, so we all got to keep practicing, and I would recommend that you practice every day, almost religiously, because I have found from my experience in the past that if I take 2 or 3 days off, I may as well start from scratch again. You've got to keep at it for a set amount of time every day, and just do it very, very slowly. I know it's very monotonous. Try to watch TV or read a newspaper or something while you practice your scales, and just remember all the technique, right hand and left hand, no pressure with either hand, and just do your scales, double pick, no problem. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.